All those opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Jaworski is excused. We have one item on the agenda tonight, rezoning. That is A1816, rezoning 4.23 acres. Lot as read here, located at the southeast corner of North Main Street and Cooper Foster Park Road from R1 to C2. Mr. Mayor, this was submitted by you. Would like to tell us a little bit about it?
Let me just talk for a minute how we got to this point and then where we actually need to go to from here. This piece of property is at the corner of Cooper Foster and North Main Street. It's currently zoned residential, and there's a company would like to rezone that to C2 to put a medical facility on a portion of that property. This first had to appear in front of Planning Commission, and we had discussion at Planning Commission, and it was passed unanimous to send this onto the floor of council. So where we are here now is in committee. Council has to, of course, approve to send it on to council, but there's also a public hearing schedule which will appear before the council meeting next week. I think we've got 6:30, I believe, next week.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, so we're planning for plenty of time. And all the adjoining property owners have been sent letters, registered letters. There's a few that have had address problems. We've figured that out and resent letters, I believe. So as far as I know, everybody has been contacted. And Mr. Caleb Fozzie is here with the company that would like to rezone this property and build a facility. So I would like to, at this time, unless you have any questions about the actual process, but I would like Mr. Fozzie to come up and talk about what's actually being proposed to be built on that site.
Sure. Mr. Fozzie, would you like to come up to the podium and please state your name and place of residence for...
Sure thing. Good evening, everybody. My name is Caleb Fozzie. I'm here representing Nova Development, which is we are hoping to put in a medical office building, as Mayor Costello said, in the southeast corner of Cooper Foster and North Main Street. I represent a group of physicians, nephrologists particularly, that are looking to put in a medical office building, which is essentially a private practice, approximately 2,500 square feet, with an extension for a dialysis unit that's approximately 10,000 square feet. So the overall size on the lot that we're currently trying to develop is around 12,000 square feet that we're looking to put there. This is an area that is of great importance to these physicians. They operate, it's primarily in Lorain County, and the vast majority of their patients are from both the city of Lorain and Amherst, and this is kind of a strategic position for them, but also one that is very convenient for a lot of their patients that, as it stands right now, are traveling to Elyria mainly to see them. And actually the practice just recently grew. They just acquired another physician, Dr. George Bizak, who operates primarily in the city of Amherst as well. So that's going to continue to grow kind of the footprint that they have in the area. As it relates to the lot specifically, we really do feel like this is the absolute best use of the land that we can think of for this lot. With it currently being residential, and we understand that that intersection, one being with of high importance and based on traffic, and what it's currently being used for, the preliminary research and the information that we've obtained so far leads us to believe that it's going to have a very minor impact on the traffic in the intersection, along with kind of what the plans that we would like to have for that lot. Like I said, as it stands right now, we're looking to put in that 2,500 square foot office to operate as a medical practice, along with the dialysis unit. But we are hopeful that with the lot being 4.2 acres, what we're looking to develop right now is about half the lot. So what we're hopeful is that as that site grows, and should it be rezoned, obviously, and as it grows, and we show that it's it's successful as used as a medical office building, we can bring in other physicians, other nephrologists perhaps, or dentists, or something that fits along with the already existing use that we would have for it being a medical office building. We think that, you know, obviously with it currently not being used, it's a great opportunity for the city of Amherst as well to get an increased tax revenue from the location, which doesn't exist at the moment, and can alleviate some of the problems or some of the you know, potential problems, I should say, that could exist with letting another company take that lot that would use it for something that might have a much increased impact on the traffic in the area with that intersection. I know from my personal experience being a little tricky to navigate with North Main Street and Cooper Foster and whatnot, and you know, and then something we definitely want to work with the city to do if there's going to be future plans to kind of whether it's expand Cooper Foster, widen it, and you know, something that we're willing to work with the city as much as possible to make sure that its use is best suited not only for us and what we would like to do, but most importantly for the citizens in the area and the city of Amherst to make sure that, you know, there's not any issues there, that, you know, if another company or another owner tried to take the lot and use it for something else, it could potentially have a much higher increased rate of impact on the traffic.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time to explain to us kind of what you're looking to do. I have a bunch of questions,
Sure.
and I apologize that I wasn't at that planning committee meeting because I'm sure a lot of these were asked already. The first thing we have here is we have your group, investment group of doctors. Are they going to be purchasing the property?
Yes.
Who's the current owner right now?
The current owner, I believe, is
TJ Co.
yeah, TJ Company, which is, I believe, I'm the agent that I've been working with, Mr. Sean Brady, who I believe.
Okay. And Sean's going to sell it to this group,
Yes.
all 4.5 acres, 4.2, excuse me, 4.2 acres.
That's correct.
And on that 4.2 acres, you're asking for us to go from an R1 to a C2.
That's correct.
And with that C2 request, you're asking for all 4.2 acres to be zoned
That's correct.
C2. But you're only going to develop only half an acre.
As it stands right now, yes. Well, not half an acre, no, we're close to 2 acres.
So 2 acres,
I believe it's approximately 1.7, but like I said, we're still kind of working with our current contractors right now, working on the design and layout and trying to figure out what the best way to do it, also keeping in mind that there is a potential that we might shrink the lot a little bit if that is something that we're going to be working with you guys to do. After speaking with the mayor regarding, you know, potentially widening the street, you know, the positioning of the lot and whatnot. So we're still working. We don't have a final absolute size, but I can approximate it right now that it's going to be under 2 acres, but approximately I'd say 1.7 right now.
so with 1.7 acres, now in front of me, I don't have any renderings or any mock-ups. Did you bring a kind of design look that you want to do so that planning could see what you're attempting to do with this, whether it's going to be a 1-story, 2-story, what the footprint's going to look like, anything in that regards before we sign off on a R1 to C2?
Well, so as it stands right now, from what I understood about the process is, you know, the fact that we're not finalizing anything, I don't want to give you guys a site plan that might change over the course of the next month or so. From what I understand, you know, I have preliminary kind of sight of what it would look like on the unit, and I can definitely tell you based on what we're, you know, the absolute certainty that it's going to be 1 story, and you know, in terms of the location on the lot, you know, we're not, to be completely frank, we're not really concerned about future development at this point. The only use that we have for the lot right now is what we're currently proposing to do, which is that, but we want to keep it open for potential use in the future for us to grow it as its already intended use, more or less an expansion of what we would put in there, not, you know, because, you know, the same concerns that I believe the citizens of Amherst and you guys might have as well about other uses on the lot exists for us as well. You know, a dialysis unit essentially, and with the nephrologists, you know, it's hopefully something that you or any loved ones that you guys have never have to go through, but it's a very it's a tough process, and paying attention to traffic and paying attention to all those things is something that's very important to us, because it affects our patients and it affects the well-being for the physicians and the interaction with the patients that they have, to make sure that there's not any, getting in and out of the lot, for example, and leaving that lot is something that we pay attention to, and what we want to make sure that nothing goes next to us as well that would go against that. And so we want to have that opportunity to grow if we're able to, if things go well with our proposed use of the lot right now.
And so, and I would understand for privacy reasons, for many other reasons, you'd want to keep as much foot traffic away from there, except for the patients that would come see you. I totally respect that, and I actually appreciate that, seeing as how you're sitting right in the corner of a residential area. The next, and the reason I asked for the footprint, is this something that is going to be office buildings? It's going to be designed in such a way that it just can't be turned into a cigar bar or some sort of,
that's out of the question as far as
because we're opening this up for one, an unknown for half of this zoning area, more than half. Looks like 2.5 acres will be possibly, we don't know. We could zone it, and who knows what could go in there. That right there concerns me. The second piece of this that concerns me is what type of building you're going to put in.
Sure.
And of course, we cannot, decide. I believe legally we can't say under this request to go from a R1 to C2. We can't put any restraints on your building, your design. We either have to say yes or no. I'm kind of surprised this didn't come in as a jet or some sort of multi-use. Yeah, PUD. I would thought that would have been a way that we could have had a better
You'd
control
have to
of
have
it.
the whole site developed, and there'd have to be a multiple use, but there isn't at this time.
Right, and that may have been something that would have spurred a half development of this spot. I don't like the idea of rezoning 4.2 acres at the corner of a residential area for a future unknown. So for me, I would have liked to seen that full development. I would have liked to seen the doctors come in with another group and said, hey, this is how we'd like to develop this entire footprint, and this is how it would look, and this is why we don't think it's going to have a major impact on the residents, on the traffic and such. So that is some of my concerns there. And before I lose my time, Mr. Chair, I know I'm going to add it says and I appreciate, by the way, I want to point out, Mr. Carlson, I was looking at your notes or whatever, and I do appreciate the fact that Mr. Carlson is had been answering a lot of questions and actually bringing up some good points about how we should approach this as the city and keep an eye on rezoning and the change and maybe the process that we go through. Sorry, I didn't have a chance to speak with you before this meeting on this issue. But I think for now, I would have liked to see that mixed use. I would have liked to have seen something that would have transitioned. And if not, I would like to have split this lot and zoned it piece at a time. If it's not being used anyway, we don't have to worry about, and it's R1, one house next to it would be a lot less foot traffic and wouldn't be, what's the word I'm looking for? Privacy for that facility would still be there and maintained. But to open it up, we don't know if this group of investors decides to move their offices somewhere else, what does that become? And that's our biggest concern, or my biggest concern, sorry. And I think our residents' biggest concern is, what will it become? Will it become a strip, one-story strip mall, if you will, outlet? What will it become? So I think I'm trying to protect my residents as well on this. I yield the floor because I need more information.
All right, Mr. Mayor, you got something to add?
Just one thing about the whole planning process, this will have to go back in front of planning commission, and road ingress and egress will have to be talked about. Some of the things I think I'm worried about with maybe zoning that half, the ingress might have to be as far as east as possible on that lot to safely get people in and out of there. So, I don't know if that would be really prudent thinking for safety and traffic reasons. The lot directly next door, I believe, is a church. And right across the street, then is already a small medical facility. Just the opposite of what you're thinking. It used to be a quick stop, and now it's a medical facility.
It's leaving too, though. I believe they're moving and building.
I don't think so.
That was my understanding.
We don't know that completely yet.
Oh, that fell through.
Yeah, so we don't know that for sure yet. But I think to put that type of money into a medical facility, I would think they're going to be here to stay, and to worry about that, to gain such a good thing to the city. I know it's not a perfect situation, but I think it's a pretty good fit for that spot. There's been a lot of other developers look at it for other things, apartment buildings. Nobody's, those things kind of been never made it past planning commission. This is one that unanimously made it through planning commission. I really think it's a good fit there, especially since church on one side, it's already some commercial across the street. So it's a long process yet to go.
And if I
Thank
may,
you.
I do have, like I said, this is preliminary, so these can be subject to change in terms of the site plan, but if it's something that's helpful, I can pass around. Unfortunately, I only have one copy, and there's two things here. One is just the site plan that we currently have right now, which you can take a look at, and then the other is it's not quite a traffic study, but it's part of our due diligence in working with the contractors. It's essentially a trip generation analysis that they do that basically lets us know if our traffic impact would warrant a traffic study, which was overwhelmingly a no based on that. Based on the Ohio Department of Transportation, I believe that figure is if in the trip generation study, if you get a number that's over 100 basically vehicles that would add to it, then it warrants a trip traffic study, and the number that they got was 30, which is very low, but I can pass that down so you can take a look at that if that's helpful, and you guys can keep that. And
I can include that in the minutes for the members of the committee as well.
Sure, absolutely. And I can add this, and like I said, I can't stress enough that these aren't this isn't a final site, but you mentioned a few things, Mr. Miller, that I would like to respond to that I think are very valid points and something that's also important to us, and the mayor also talked about kind of the intended use and kind of the vision that we have and how we intend to stay. This isn't the kind of investment that we're looking to do to add value to the land in the hopes that 5-10 years down the line, we flip that investment to make money. That's not at all what the positions are trying to do. This is more or less, especially as it relates to dialysis, the primary function of this is they wanted to put the practice there. And the extension for the dialysis unit is, unfortunately, I can't quite say right now who that tenant would be for the dialysis unit, but we have worked with a few and spoken with one primarily, but with a few different potential tenants that would take that unit as a dialysis unit. What I can't speak on dialysis generally is one of the reasons why we're looking at this lot is because one of the companies that we're working with is not very satisfied with the lot that they're currently in, and this is more or less a build-to-suit for that. And the way that these dialysis companies, they pay very, very close attention to every single bit of detail. And this, I can speak on behalf of the physicians as well, that I can't stress enough how important it is for them that everything about this lot, whether it ends up being in this corner or wherever we end up, every single detail as it relates to the color of the walls, the pictures, what the staff wears, like the mayor said, the ingress and where it is very important, because like I said, on your best day, if you have to run errands or you have to go anywhere and you have to sit in a lot and it takes you 15 minutes to turn left on a lot, even on your best day, that can be a little bit aggravating. Mm-hmm. Leaving dialysis, that's not something, like I said, that's pleasant for anyone to go through. And so these companies and the physicians that I represent, they pay very, very, very close attention to those types of details. So from the ground up, both with the process that we're going through for design, as it relates to the curb appeal, as it relates to the whole process of patients coming in and coming out, and understanding that the vast majority of patients that will be visiting this unit, based on the demographics and the types of patients that visit nephrologists and dialysis units, it's not the kind where there's going to be multiple cars coming in. It's more or less kind of a service that comes in to drop patients off, and from the second they get picked up to the second that they get dropped off, and the whole process throughout the unit, whether it's with the physicians or with the dialysis unit. Like I said, that every single detail is paid attention to that. So the kind of as it relates to the design, you know, it's not something that we're looking to have a multiple use for. You know, where when we build it, if for whatever reason things don't work out, it can turn around and be used for something else. It's very specific based on the exam rooms that are going to be built for the 2,500 square foot unit for the practice as well as the dialysis unit. The design is basically from you know, as we move along in the process, it's to suit that need and that need only. And like I said, kind of regarding the concern that you have for future use, which is more than warranted, you know, we look at it in the same way as well. We don't want necessarily to put, if we parcel off that land and then we leave the other 2 acres open, then it's completely out of our hands what goes next to us. And that's very important to the physicians and very important to the dialysis company as well. They don't want a gas station next to it. They don't want something that doesn't fit the need of the patients, and that's their primary concern. So, you know, we feel a lot more comfortable also with the potential of, you know, whether the practice continues to grow and they want to expand. And if you look at the site plan, we're very particular about where the unit is and where the practice is, with the 2,500 square foot being more east on the lot. Because if you want to continue to expand, the only expansion that is, you know, I can't speak and I can't guarantee that there will be an expansion, but if that's the type of future development that we're looking for, we want to ensure that, you know, we're able to bring in another medical practice that would like to be in there to kind of, whether it's a private practice for cardiology or dentistry or something that fits, like I said, the already intended use for it. You know, we don't have any plans to put in a dollar store or a retail shop or anything like that, because it's a tremendous contrast on what we're trying to do. So we, you know, feel more comfortable having that type of control over the lot, as opposed to leaving it to chance that someone else can parcel it with the current owner and say we only buy the 2 acres that we need. A, that means that we'll have to go through this whole process again, obviously, and have to repurchase the land. And B, you know, someone else can do that. Someone else that decides that if we're successful and someone wants to take advantage of the fact that there's patients there and wants to use it to their advantage any way that they want, they can buy that land. And, you know, I can't obviously speak, I mean, obviously I would hope that you guys would have the same concerns that you're showing me that with them, if they're going to do that. But since that's something that's out of our control, we feel a lot more comfortable with the notion of saying we are in complete control of what could potentially be built on that land. And the only thing that's on our agenda as a potential use for it is basically what we're currently using it for. But at the moment right now, we have the tenants, both being the physicians themselves that will open up the practice and the dialysis unit to suit the need. But since I can't tell you guys that, you know, we've secured another practice or another physician to come in and do so, we're hopeful that the success of the land, of the lot, is something that would draw more people in.
Very good. Mr. Ramsey, you had a remark, I think.
Yeah, I have a question actually.
Sure.
The parcel that we're talking about, it looks like it's just one parcel, right?
That's correct.
And it's that entire, what looks like farmland, you know, from the street all the way to the parcel that has the church on it? Is that what we're talking about?
I believe so, yeah. I don't think there's anything there.
Now, if, this is really kind of a question for Tony and Frank, because you guys probably deal with this a lot more than I do. If someone's gonna divide that parcel and, you know, do like split the parcel in some way, does the government have any kind of a check or interaction in that process when you split a parcel?
They have to obtain planning commission approval for the split.
Okay.
Now, it would be a minor subdivision, so it doesn't involve the same kind of complicated process that a major subdivision would, but there does have to be approval for this.
Okay. I think that's good news from Mr. Miller's point of view, if he's got concerns about should this property be sold or transferred or have some other kind of use, because I would assume either you know, if they're going to do something like that, they would have to divide the parcel and then sell that other parcel off to another owner, or they're going to sell the parcel that they own already. It's one parcel of land. And frankly, if you didn't use this land for something like this, I don't know what you would use it for, to be honest with you. That's just my opinion. I don't know you, sir, and I don't know who's going in there or anything, but I do know that that land's been kind of empty for a long time, and we probably, at least, I suppose from the income tax office's point of view, we appreciate having another source of revenue in there, so whatever that's worth. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Janik?
As a resident of the area, I noticed your traffic study was done between the hours of 4 and 6 p.m. And I can tell you between 2:30 and 3 o'clock when the schools get out, I have been back beyond or behind the Terra Lane Bridge, or the bridge over North Main, waiting in traffic, because that particular intersection at Cooper Foster and North Main gets very congested. There needs to be a right turning lane installed in there so that people can go to the right and make that right turn pretty smoothly and evenly. But more importantly, there's school buses, the larger school buses, that are waiting to take a left down the hill to Cooper Foster. They clog up the traffic. Like I said, it's been backed up, and the hours that your traffic study was at was not at the hours that really where, you know, the main beef of that traffic exists. So.
Well, I will say that the traffic study from, let me get everything in here, those were just the peak hours that
Right.
was mentioned.
Right.
So I think that's, you know, I'll definitely make note of that. And the one thing I also wanted to add to that is, as I mentioned before in speaking with the mayor, this is a concern for us too. There was actually another lot that we looked at in the city of Lorraine that had similar issues in terms of ingress and getting in and out. And, you know, whether it's putting a curb cut on North Main Street or, you know, as far east as possible on Cooper Foster, we would like to, as much as possible, alleviate that. And if that means that we gotta cut 10 feet off the top of our parcel to widen the road and add a left turning lane or anything like that, that's definitely on the table for us. That's something that we would like to do, because it's not just, we don't look at it as, oh, we're doing a favor for the city, not at all. This is something that's important for you know, anyone who's coming in and out. But also, I think just as anyone who's kind of been on that intersection, as you said, I think it would alleviate a lot of the issues that are there. And with the benefits of that lot being as big as it is, you know, if we're able to cut the top of it a little bit to widen the streets, you know, that's not anything that's going to get in the way of our plans and what we would like to do for the lot.
Yeah. Mr. Nahorn and then Mr. Miller.
I had
I'm very sorry, I didn't realize you weren't done.
I don't know if we've ever considered something like this, but the traffic that's heading actually the other way towards, on the opposite direction on Cooper Foster, doesn't necessarily slow down when they come up to that intersection. Some of them come in at speeds off of the 4-lane Cooper Foster, 50 to 55 typically. They'll come in that hot in the evenings or late afternoon. I don't know if there's any way to consider a roundabout in that intersection, but it would definitely slow down the traffic, but keep it moving at a constant rate, which I think it needs. So just something to consider as we move forward, because
I'd compare this a lot to that last project on Kresge, where some of that developed, and then we worked with the developer to do some traffic studies and some improvements to that little section of road. I would compare this very similar, where we'd work with the developer, and I'm sure Planning Commission is going to require a full in-depth traffic study, whether we partner with it or it's on the backs of the developer, but there will be some improvements made to that intersection if this happens.
that's mainly what I'm concerned with. I know the residents around there will be concerned with it as well. So, thank you. I yield the floor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Nahorn.
Thank you. You know, personally, it's always nice to see a little bit of open land within a neighborhood, but we all know that this area is going to be developed. So the best way to develop it is what this body is charged with, is looking at. And so we have a major responsibility considering, you know, a change in zoning. Zoning, of course, is an extremely important tool which aids in setting the tone for a neighborhood in that particular area within the town. Having attended the Planning Commission meeting when this topic was discussed, I was very pleased to hear from the Commission their active involvement in and concern for ensuring that any changes would not negatively affect the area. So I drive through this intersection at least twice a day and am extremely aware of the traffic challenges certainly that Mr. Janik has brought up and Mr. Miller. After discussions, I'm confident Mayor Costello, our building department, Planning Commission, and ultimately this body will not only positive, will not only ensure positive development here, but also improvements to any issues that we see in the traffic challenges especially. So I'm confident that we'll be able to work through those and come out with a positive ending.
Thank you, Mr. Nahorn. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the time you're taking to explain this. The one thing that I would ask for something like this is a no small issue. We're looking to make a major change in the way our city is going to be developed, and that's why it has to come out of Planning Commission to us. This is a piece of property that sits in a pretty precarious way. I think our Councilman Janik had made a very good point. The traffic here is an issue. And I know maybe your study doesn't have it, and the number of vehicles that you have won't add the 100, that threshold, but I think that threshold's already been met. And so that's where my belief is with the traffic that I've seen going through this intersection at different times. I think that threshold's already there, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't know what developments are bringing it. Maybe it's developments on Cooper Foster. Maybe it's now because of the developments going on down on Cooper Foster West. Yes, towards Colby. I think that the different box stores and the different draw down there with Mercy and what have you is getting a large number of traffic in that direction as well. This is an area that if we're going to add to in a development, it sounds to me like you would care even just as much about the traffic issue. It sounds to me like your team is very meticulous in making sure that if they're coming in or leaving a dialysis, it's as easy and as stress-free as possible. There has to be something done here. And I would love to see you say, yes, let's give the city 15 feet or so of our property down the side of this to add a third lane, a third full lane in that direction, and allow that turn lane. So you have a turn right, turn left, and then through traffic. I've been to the Planning Commission meetings. Our mayor and past mayors have appointed some pretty good people. Please, by no means am I saying that they are lacking in judgment or that I completely think they're off. I just believe we're releasing, without assurance, a major zoning change. Do I think that this is going to be developed? Yes. If it had to be changed into commercial, I kind of like what you're proposing. I would prefer it over the next Dollar General coming in, for God's sake. I mean, this is getting to a point where we're done with those. We really need office building. Medical building's beautiful. It serves our people, and it serves our residents. So I like that. I'm nervous about turning over 2.5 acres to a C2 without any ability to see what goes in there. I trust what your group's trying to do, and I take your word on it. The owner of this property, if I have the owner correct, they do their due diligence and care about Amherst. So I believe they're not going to just turn it over for something like that. They're going to turn it over to a good group if they work with and partner with. So even though that's there, I still would like you to consider working with planning and understanding that myself as a councilman and somebody who's going to make sure that they're looking out for the residents just as well, but maybe in a different lens,
Of course.
that you consider the traffic there. And you work with the mayor and our engineer, our city engineer, and we find this is a great opportunity to fix a problem. Before we develop it, let's fix the problem now. And Mr. Janik had stated a very fine point. We have speeds, access, turn lanes. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done at this intersection because it's only going to get developed when that next development comes down the road, down by your house. When that next development comes in, you just added another, 100 homes? 100 and how many, 9?
109.
Yeah, I was off by 9. Sorry, but you're right, 109. Thank you for being so on top of that. That's going to add your 100 plus cars, not all at the same time. So this is a great time for us to get it right. I hope you work with, and I hope our city is willing to to fight for that.
Sure.
To fight for the proper intersection development. Not sure about a roundabout, enjoyed them in Europe, thought they were very valuable, but I don't know what would it take here, but love to see something come out of this that will do two things. Allow for you to invest in Amherst, bring what I think is a high quality, patient-friendly, citizen-based business, but also maybe help with some of the traffic issues we're having. And I think it'll help your business as well. I thank you so much for the time, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the map. Please, if we do this again, can we have council have these materials to look at so that we can get a better idea of what we're doing? Because I just feel that we didn't have enough in our hands. And I apologize that I didn't get to somebody and get that.
If I may, I will say, you know, we want to be as transparent and work with you guys early on in the process. Before I even went to the current owners, I actually met with the building inspector and spoke with David and kind of wanted to get an idea of the process so I can make sure, and you know, the contractors that we're working with are located in Amherst. We're working with Star Builders who are familiar, obviously, with the area, and that's something that was important to us.
It's important to me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things, obviously, that you mentioned, and one of the things that I wanted to also touch on is as it relates to the traffic, the trip generation analysis. That number 30 only relates to what we would be doing.
Right.
So the overall already existing, whether it's through another residential, due to the already existing traffic, that doesn't necessarily relate to this. So, you know, it's basically what it says is if what we plan to develop exceeds that number of 100, then that's something that would kind of raise that red flag of saying we need to do that. That being said, although this already shows us, at least as what we're doing, that it's only 30 and it seems like to be a minimal impact, due to the importance of that intersection, this isn't, you know, something that if it was a completely different location and it was only that 30 number might be something different, but since we already know the history and the type of issues that already exist, whether we build there or not, those issues aren't going to go away, which is why we're even willing to go a step further, even though the trip generation analysis says we don't necessarily need to do a traffic study. We're willing to work with you guys, whether, like you said, it's 10, 15 feet, whatever it needs to be, to make that intersection and make the road more suitable, not just for the citizens, but also, obviously also for us. And another thing I just wanted to touch on was, you know, going through this process, and like I said, working with Star Builders in Amherst. You know, I spoke on this briefly earlier about how, you know, the physicians who are the primary, you know, I guess they're the ones that are really pushing to get this done. You know, they see your citizens a lot. And this community in this area is something that's also very important to them. And, you know, working with Sean Brady, the seller's agent, obviously, and I believe he's actually one of the current owners of the lot, you know, that was something that I made very clear to him, is that this is an area, because we obviously did our due diligence in looking at the overall footprint, and, you know, I learned something new in the process, that basically the north half of Cooper Foster is actually not in Amherst. I did not know that. But we did our due diligence of kind of looking at other lots, and it was important to us not only that this specific lot serves its purpose of serving the community, but also, you know, the dialysis unit that we're hopeful to has be a tenant is actually currently located in Amherst, and that's something that we would like to keep it that way, if possible. But we understand that, you know, everything that we're doing is contingent on the rezoning process, and if it's something that we're not able to do, you know, we obviously we have to go to other avenues, and you know, I think that ultimately, you know, I'm comfortable speaking on behalf of the physicians and speaking on behalf of what we want to do, that we're not trying to hide anything, obviously, and we want to be as transparent as possible early on. So to your point of trying to provide more information, anything at all that we can provide, whether it's preliminary with you understanding, obviously, that it might not be the final version of what we're doing, we're willing to do if it makes your decisions easier and it makes you guys have a better understanding of what we're trying to do. Because, like I said earlier, I really do think this is the best use of the land that we can think of, and I think it could be beneficial for all parties involved.
Thank you very much.
I hope we're the red flags for the traffic, Mr. Janik and I and others. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Calvert?
Yes. looking at this process, number one, we're talking about the rezoning. We have the luxury of having this group come with a potential plan for that property. And to have the group wanting to buy the property and do the zoning and build there gives a lot of safety, in my opinion, of how this area is going to be developed. If it's going to be developed C2, this would be the best C2 to put into that area abutting a residential property, because there is not going to be any nights where you're going to have people in there and lights, noise, everything else going. I'm assuming that generally they're going to be cut off about 5 o'clock at the very latest. The traffic's impact that they're talking 30 cars a day, that's going to include the employees that
Correct.
are in that area. Those employees are going to go in first thing in the morning. They're going to be leaving in the evening. They're not going to be leaving and coming during the time where we're having the school release the students. And that's going to, that's going to be part of taking some of that worry about the traffic in there. This group, dealing with the patients that they are seeing, they definitely want to reduce the stress on those patients as much as possible, which includes getting to dialysis and getting home from dialysis. So this group is going to be more apt to work with the city to take care of any traffic problems, take care of how the building looks, take care of any of the neighborhood problems. I see this as the best win for the city for this property at this time. And I would make a motion to take this to the floor, council.
Very well, we have a motion on the floor to take this to the floor of council. Mr. Deminsky.
Second with comments.
Mr. Deminsky seconds. Your comment?
Thank you. I had quite a few questions and almost all of them are answered, so I appreciate that. I won't go at length because everyone else has talked about traffic, but I'd be remiss if I haven't said that I've also been contacted by residents complaining about the traffic, so just to put that out there. I did have one question though. Do you know approximately how many employees will be there?
So as it stands right now, I can't speak for the dialysis unit itself, since that, even in the development process, I don't know if I've mentioned this already, but the dialysis unit that we're actually looking to build, we only built the shell, meaning we basically built four walls and a roof. The reason why that is as I mentioned earlier, the dialysis company kind of pays very close attention to everything, so they actually lay out the inside of it, and they're the ones who fully staff it. So the staff, in terms of where it comes from, my assumption would be that they would take the already existing staff from the unit that they're moving and move it in, but I can't speak on their behalf. As it relates to the positions in the practice, I think as it stands right now, I believe it's only about 4 or so in terms of, I think there's a nurse practitioner, which is the 2 physicians that would be actually housed in this location. And then there's, I believe, another nurse as well that would be there. That being said, with the merging, I guess, with Dr. George Bizak, who already operates in the city of Amherst, I believe his staff, for the most part, is the one that's going to be moved there. But as it relates to, I'm assuming what you're alluding to is an increase in jobs in the area. For me to speak on that in just a moment, the way that we've operated in the past, we only have 1 dialysis unit that we already have, and that wasn't a ground-up development that we acquired in Sheffield. But there's plenty of other things that we look at as an opportunity for an increased work in the area. Obviously we're all very well familiar with Cleveland weather, and we know that lots need to be plowed. We know that landscaping needs to be done, and we know that there's a tremendous amount of maintenance work that needs to be done as well. And the group that I represent obviously is in full ownership and would have basically the responsibility to maintain the grounds of the property as well as the shell of the dialysis unit, basically the roof, and then the walls as well as the medical practice, and that's something that we very much intend on staying local. You know, whether it means the landscaping or the other, you know, the offshoots, I guess, of work that would come with the land being developed would be increased work for local businesses in the area to assist us, whether that be, like I said, in terms of maintenance, landscaping, plowing in that regard. And if there's just one thing I add, if I remember correctly in the council meeting before, excuse me, if I understand the process correctly, you know, whether once it gets rezoned, but before anything gets built, we have to come back with the plans of what we're going to be building. So I think that gives the city a voice, obviously, in the process moving forward on not just what we're doing now and when things get finalized and we're ready to go with the development plan, working with the building inspector and kind of understanding everything that needs to be proposed in order to go through planning, not just for what we're doing now, but should there be any development in the future. I don't think it's possible for me to tell you guys, hey, we're only looking to put in a medical office building in the future, and then 5 years from now or a few years from now when we decide we want to grow, if I come to you guys and say, hey, we're going to put in a sandwich shop, you know, I can't do that without your involvement. So there's, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a step in the future where when we do move forward with future development, if that's something we decide to do and expand into other medical offices, then when we have to come back to Planning Commission to build that extension and move forward, you guys are going to be, you know, from what I understand, very much involved in that process.
Mr. Dembinski, anything else?
No, I'm okay, actually. Thank you. I yield.
All right, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, actually, I think we don't have a say in whether you put a sandwich shop in there. Once you get C2, as long as your business, whatever that may be, it falls within C2, you could put just about anything in there, and thus my nervousness over it. I think you've actually have made enough points to me to reduce that fear I had initially when I started hearing this without, and then not having some of the stuff in front of me had me a little bit reserved, to say the least. But, and I think Mr. Carlson can probably speak to that, or Mr. Corr can speak to that if I'm wrong, but I do believe that once it's zoned C2, anything that meets the building codes, doesn't matter what the business is or how many customers it takes.
As long as it falls within the C2.
And that's a pretty wide scope. That's a big brush that's painted under C2, from my understanding. Mr. Carlson?
I think that's true.
So I wanted you to understand that
Sure.
this is why my nervousness was
Yeah,
there.
of course.
Once you get that particular build in there, and I think this follows up, Mr. Carlson, if we approve this, is it dedicated on the use that he's purchasing it and planning for?
No, rezoning is independent of any specific use.
So let's just say, and we'll pull your group out,
Sure.
we do this and it's not you, and somebody comes in with the magical, you know, carpet ride and says, we're going to build this. And this is what we want to do. And we approve that, and you buy it, and then you're like, you know what? It just doesn't look like anybody needs dialysis anymore. We're looking at putting in a Dollar General. We can't do anything about that.
Turn it back.
I don't believe we can.
Turn it back.
Can we do that with a owner not requesting a zoning change?
The city can initiate a zoning change.
Even on an owner's land,
Yes.
without the
Yes.
owner's,
Yes.
okay. So we would have to hurry up.
It's not often done, but I mean, can be done.
So if
Either
you,
the planning
so,
commission or the council can initiate action for a zoning.
so if they did come back and say, this is something we're gonna do, it's gonna be different than the initial, we
There
can,
might be difficulties with that, because there's the concept that that they may be entitled to a certain use. Well, it might be if a building permit is granted, I think certainly, but I don't want to get into
my
that.
concern is we could be legally taken to court in regards to I bought that property because it was zoned. And now that you've changed it back to R1, I've lost value on my property,
Well,
and I'm gonna sue for damages, and the city
Yes,
could be on the hook for that. Would they,
yes,
could they
yes,
not?
yes. I mean, there are these things called a partial taking, where the city has removed value from land by rezoning. And the question is that compensable to the property owner? The answer may be yes. I can't give you a definitive answer.
But a judge could rule against the city on that and say, you've cost X amount of investment dollars.
Yes, possibly.
And so that's why we're all here trying to work with people who want to invest. I believe that everybody's in it for the right reasons. We're just going to try to make sure we can solve a couple problems and provide a development that's proper for that area.
Absolutely, and if I think I mentioned this earlier, but actually where we stand right now with the owners is we're just in the purchase agreement and kind of the due diligence process that we laid out in the purchase agreement with the current owners. This is the focal point of that due diligence period. Understanding that obviously if it doesn't get rezoned, that voids the purchase agreement that was signed, and you know, we move on to another location that we see fit. As it relates to the point that you mentioned about a potential us saying that, you know, we intend to use it for a medical office, and then as soon as you guys rezone it, we change our minds. I can tell you that the amount of resources and the investment and the time that we spent to do this has been driven, you know, the formation of these two physicians coming together and working with the dialysis company is for this reason alone. You know, it's driven for this, you know, if from an investment and from a business standpoint, you know, we don't have anything else to put in there. There's nothing that we intend on doing other than what comes to you now. So, you know, based on the design and everything that we've done, both with the contractors and with you guys, like I said, before we even contacted the seller, we've tried to be as transparent as possible with our intended use of the land, the process of us going through it, and you know, we don't have any objections to a public hearing. We don't have any objections to anything that you guys want to do on behalf of your citizens, because we truly do believe that not only is what we're trying to do the best use of the land, but you know, I think it is something that will benefit everybody. You know, obviously with as it relates to the traffic, you know, there's everything that we're trying to do to work with you guys on every step of the process is something that we're willing to do, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we're writing, you know, blank checks and saying that we'll do anything that you guys need, but it's a matter of you know, I think that to make this work, it would not be smart for us to not be with you guys and transparent very much in the beginning of the process. So as you mentioned earlier, you know, any information that you need that you think would be helpful for us that we've already obtained, that could help alleviate some of the fears that you have or anything that we're doing, you know, all you have to do is ask, and we're more than willing to give that information out if that's something we can do.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dembinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think all of our concerns aren't really even with you know, this plan specifically. It's more just trying to future-proof what you have going on. You know, we have the multi-use zoning thing, which has been used for the housing developments to have, you know, the very tiny lots, which wasn't really the intention. But it gave council the ability to have a little bit more say in what could go in there eventually. Could we use the multi-zoning thing here and would not affect what they're trying to do, which would still give council a bit of a say in what happens there? Because again, what's been proposed, I don't think there's an issue with. Just
I
trying
think
to
it would be
future-proof.
difficult because the planned development district kind of envisions there to be a kind of a rather specific development of an entire piece of property, including the subdivision of that property, including things like the architectural design of the buildings, and kind of ensuring a kind of a compatible and coherent development of the entire lot. I think in this kind of case, it doesn't quite fit, is my opinion. I don't know if that answers the question, but I guess if you were to say, well, we want a PD on this, that what they'd come to council with is a plan that would show the footprint of buildings, the ingress and egress, the streets, parking, lighting, landscaping, the whole thing for all of those 4 acres. And is that what you want to do with this? I mean, they could do it, but is it more appropriate that they would request the rezoning rather than going to that length?
Well, we have multiple phases of the other housing developments. I mean, you could almost split this into phase 1 and phase 2 if they did decide to expand later on. That could just be considered a phase 2 to be determined at a later point in time.
I think it would be unusual if the first phase were a single use and a single building, to say that, to call that a phase 1 of a planned development district. That's my opinion. I mean, Tony may have a different view, or the mayor may have a different view.
I just don't think there's enough variance. I mean, the planned development district has specific things that's different than the type of zoning, the smaller than allowed lots. I mean, the ideal planned development district would talk about housing in one portion of this entire portion, and then some sort of light industrial or light commercial. I mean, there would be some kind of progression within the lot. I
Well,
really just don't think this is,
I guess ideally, I mean, we didn't do that.
ideally it'd be great, you'd
How-
have the most say with the building, but I really just don't think this fits. I don't think a building department would think this fits. And let me just speak one moment about the traffic. Let me assure you, there's gonna be something done. I mean, there's plans in the works for 3 to 4 years down the road to improve that intersection and improve that stretch of road from that intersection south. So there's already plans happening, but part of the complicities of those plans is acquiring some lands from the property owner. I mean, this really does expedite that. It probably pushes that plan up to possibly even next year. If this happens with the cooperation of a developer, not only maybe donating some land, but possibly participating in it financially. So again, I want to compare this to what we did at Kresge Road and the widening there in front of that development. This would be very similar to that. But something is in the works. There will be a traffic study. That intersection will be improved significantly sooner than later if this happens.
Mr. Janik, you had a comment, and Mr. Miller.
Yeah, you mentioned that, that there's a current dialysis center that's no longer interested in the space that they're in. Is that local in Amherst, you said, or?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, and why is that? Do you know why they're not pleased with?
I can't speak on their behalf. I just know that, that kind of one of the reasons why this process came up is, A, the nephrologists look at an opportunity where they can move their practice first and foremost. And also with the extension of the dialysis unit with, potential from what I understand in the process of obtaining a dialysis unit or, bringing in a tenant as a dialysis unit is obviously, when they have leases and they have their contracts with the current owners, wherever there are, if we are aware that there's a potential that they might leave, or if we're aware of other potential companies that would be interested in the area, where we stand is we feel like both, we know that dialysis companies generally really, really like to be right next to nephrologists, side by side with practicing physicians. That being said, we're confident that we're able to obtain a dialysis company as a tenant in that location based on its, intended use of what we want to do, but also with us kind of being aware of the potential of an already existing unit in the city of Amherst that, is close to the end of their lease and looking to move. So I can't speak on their behalf exactly what the reasoning is for doing it, whether, from what I know personally, I think it's just a matter of the unit that they currently have was not built to use as a dialysis unit. I think they moved in there as an already existing building, whether I don't actually know what the building was prior to it being a dialysis unit. And I just don't think the patients themselves are happy with it. It might be too big, or there might be issues with the building. I can't speak on their behalf, though, as why they might feel it would be necessary to leave, but we know that that's something that if, they're looking at potentially leaving, and we're able to provide a great location and an opportunity for them to build and suit it as they see fit. And that's kind of what I mentioned earlier about generally with the development of these buildings, as a developer, we're only looking to build the shell. Because when we build the shell, the dialysis company has full, basically an opportunity to design the layout and the site of the actual unit, how they see fit and how they think best suits the patients. And I don't think they had that in the previous unit,
And
which is, I think, why.
You mentioned that they're close to the end of their lease, is that?
From what I understand, yes.
So that's all I need to know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So will this will this leave down the street facility open vacant? Is that the dialysis center where, is the group coming from that dialysis center that's?
Well, the physicians, from what I understand, though, the actual physicians, they don't operate the dialysis unit, so they themselves aren't working in the dialysis unit, but I would imagine if the dialysis company leaves that already existing unit, they're not gonna have two units open right next to each other, so I
Okay.
would imagine, yes, they are leaving that other one.
So we're gonna get a dialysis unit. I have not been in there, and I apologize for my
Sure.
ignorance on this, but it sounds to me like you wanna go from a building that was not suited, not designed for a dialysis center, and be able to bring physicians next to it to service, multi-service the patients, both the dialysis aspect and then the patient care, doctor-patient care, is that
Yes,
correct?
Yeah.
So that's going to move, and then that facility there is not strictly designed for dialysis, so it could be, or would we have to wait for somebody else to come in for that specific?
I mean, from what I understand, that unit's already zoned, I don't know the exact zoning for it, but, if they leave and whoever the current owner of that lot is gonna have a vacant, a lease, basically, that they can give to whoever wants to come in and do that, assuming that it fits.
I think,
So I think the mayor
I
can-
think the location they're talking about leaving was at one time a strip mall, and it wasn't really built for, this isn't the one on Cooper Foster Road. This is one in a different location that's built in a facility that was remodeled, that used to be retail, that got converted to these doctors' offices, that'll probably convert back to retail when these doctors leave. from my
Okay, so
understanding.
that facility and I think that's some clarity that would be,
So this is
we
where
don't,
the old drug mart building,
Okay.
is where this group is, from what I
Okay.
understand.
where the Januzzi shoes or whatever is at, okay. All right, and that's what we don't want to do. We don't want to leave ourselves with, a situation where we're on another vacant building, just a building.
And one thing I just wanted to add as well is, early on, kind of talking about the different choices that you mentioned about potentially, us leaving or whatnot. When I first reached out to Mr. McCartney and kind of reached out to get the process started and to understand, we didn't approach it and say, we're looking for C2 zoning, we want to do it. It was more or less, this is what we want to do, what is the zoning that fits this?
What do we need?
What do
Fair
we
enough.
need to fit this? It
Sure.
wasn't the idea of us saying, hey, we want to get a C2 zoning
Right.
because we know it fits. It was, we want to put in a medical office building and a dialysis unit. Right now, we can't do that because it's R1. What do we need to do to get it to the point that we need to do that? And that was, I think Mr. McCartney can attest to that as well, that's something that we tried to do in the beginning, and, we're not, there's no cards that we're hiding in terms of what our plans are.
Thank you, and
Mhm.
and I think Mr. Dembitsky had a good point, though, on the mixed use. And you're afraid to, in this particular situation, you get a little nervous, that close to residential area, what you're gonna put in there. I know there's a little Dairy Mart old storefront that's being converted, and who knows what that'll change to, but the idea is how do we transition? I think Councilman Dembitsky made a good point that is there a way to transition properly, and can we still have some ability to have some influence with that? I'm finished for the evening on this. I appreciate you coming out here. I appreciate the questions being answered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor.
No problem, very good. A lot of discussion on this tonight, and rightly so. I think this is an important issue, and everyone asked terrific questions. We got a lot of good answers. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, is it Mr. Fossey?
Yes, correct. I'll just kind of close with saying that, if there's anything I can do, work with you guys individually, if there's any questions that you guys have, I'm more than willing, do not hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to further discuss any of the issues that you may have. And as Demir mentioned earlier, we're willing to work with the city in any way that we can. And obviously, I can't say anything definitively right now on what we're going to do and what we're not going to do in terms of what you guys might ask. But, if there's anything at all, I would be remiss. I don't want a situation to come up where something could have been addressed early on in the process and we didn't have an opportunity to address that issue just for sheer lack of communication or anything like that. So I really want to just stress that, we're more than willing, and I myself am more than willing to work with everyone in this room to alleviate or answer any questions that you guys may have, whether it's right now or in the future. And I'll just, kind of also close with just saying, again, I really do feel like, of all the potential uses that you can have on a piece of land like this, specifically with where it's located. I really would be hard pressed to find anything that would be better suited for that land, both for the city, the community, and what we're trying to do. Ultimately, you know, when we drew up we have our own timeline of what we would like to do based on, like I said, the potential lease being finished and what we want to do. And so we were hopeful that we can get through this process and it could be a win for everybody involved.
Before you leave, would you mind giving me your card so I can include it
Yes, please.
in the information in case any of the council members
Sure,
would
and
like
if
to
it's
contact
helpful,
you?
I can leave the full transportation trip generation analysis other than
Um,
those 2 sheets.
Sure, I think that would help. That'd be good. Okay, thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. I would clarify that this does not have the emergency attached to it, correct?
Correct.
Are there any more comments? No? We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor of sending this on to council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. Dembinski?
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Cowger?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 8:07.